Bucknutters, welcome into the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, July 29th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle, joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Bax, of all the interesting comments made by Urban Meyer and Ohio State's player reps at Big Ten Media Days in Chicago earlier this week, what interested you the most?
There's two things, and there's a tie here. One was his discussions about Michael Weber, essentially saying, hey, Mikey really needed to grow up a little bit this offseason. I really hope that he's officially grown up, considering he's essentially the starting tailback now, though I think Curtis Samuel's going to have something to say about it. And then the other thing that really caught my attention was the comment about, well, yeah, you guys are wondering where we're going to have the numbers for this year? Me too. He didn't quite say it that way, but that's how I read into the lines. Urban really does, he has so many good players coming in right now, he just can't tell them no. But I don't think he has any idea how his numbers are going to shake out right now either. And I'll admit, that's something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Having been quite the defender against oversigning for the better part of the last 5 years, I hope Urban has a realistic answer out there, because attrition only covers so much, and who knows, maybe he knows something we don't, but that to me really caught my attention. Urban admitting he doesn't really know how he's going to fit this class in that they're put together right now.
True freshman Michael Jordan, what are your thoughts on him, quote, probably being a starter, according to Urban Meyer?
Two things, actually three. Number one, if he starts as a true freshman, hey, Michigan, nice job recruiting your state. Anyways, number two, if he starts as a true freshman, that's just awesome, and congratulations to him. But number three, it ties back to those numbers that I talked about, which is, if you're a true freshman starting on the offensive line for Ohio State, how many other of the guards that have been here for a few years are essentially going to look at this and say, screw this, I'm never going to play, or I'm not waiting another year? There's a couple people we know for a fact were not pleased about their playing time last year when Elflein and Price were the starting guards. So what are they going to say this year if a true freshman comes in and beats some of those guys out? I think there's an eyeball towards, if Michael Jordan starts, that may also trigger a little bit more of the attrition to help fit those numbers. Urban thinks big picture. I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the equation.
Malcolm Pridgeon, JUCO transfer on the offensive line. What do you envision his role will be this year?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see how he picks up the playbook. And, you know, one thing that really caught my attention was Pat Elflein made a comment about the tempo that he has to learn to play at. And that's something I really didn't consider as much before. You know, how many of these other colleges play at the same pace that Ohio State can play at, and with J.T. Barrett as the firmly instilling quarterback will probably be playing at? Not a lot of guys. So these offensive linemen at OSU are going to be, I guess, in a position where they're going to be in a different sort of physical condition than you're used to doing if you're the type of lineman who runs someone over, then gets a 40-second break, then goes back and does it again. You know, if you're going 20 seconds between plays or quicker, that's a different way to learn to play. Now, if Pridgeon can adjust to that, I think he's going to be a challenger to be one of the guard spots. I think everybody's kind of pinpointing Isaiah Prince's job as the one Pridgeon would challenge for. But I also think he's good enough that he frankly doesn't have enough time to wait, that I wouldn't be surprised if he was thrown into the guard mix too. You know, who's going to be a more effective guard? A true freshman and Michael Jordan is only 18? For a guy like Malcolm Pridgeon, who's a grown-ass man, who's been playing college ball at the JUCO level already, the OSU didn't bring him here to sit. He didn't come here to sit. So I think he's going to make a real push to get on the field. It just would not surprise me whatsoever if Malcolm Pridgeon was maybe not necessarily part of the starting lineup, but, hey, maybe you want to go heavy, bring him in as the third tackle. You know, look at our tight end depth right now. It's Marcus Baugh and a bunch of freshmen. So there's probably a role for a sixth lineman, even if he isn't necessarily the starter.
Bax, you mentioned Mike Weber earlier in the show and how Urban Meyer said he needed to grow up, and even, you know, some of his teammates, Pat Elflein, Raekwon McMillan said that, you know, he needed to grow up. Raekwon McMillan said he still hasn't made it through a training camp, you know, all the way through a training camp without getting injured, which, you know, I mean, last year he did have a torn meniscus. It's like he had knee surgery. It wasn't like he was just had some bruise, but still, the point remains, he still has to prove some things to his teammates. But as for him growing up, they made it seem like that was in the past. Are you buying that he has now grown up, that, you know, this year's made all the difference in the world? Do you think that's still a concern?
Well, I absolutely think it's a concern. The guy's still a freshman. You know, and there was definitely a discussion that last year that Weber wasn't happy that he ended up redshirting the whole season. Now, look, when I was 19, I wasn't the most mature person in the world. Heck, I'm 32, and I'm probably still not the most mature person in the world. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of pressure that comes along with being the starting tailback at Ohio State, especially following in the footsteps of Carlos Hyde and Ezekiel Elliott. You know, Weber's got a lot on his plate. And I think a big thing for him is going to be, can you bring it on a daily basis, you know? There was a lot of discussion last year about how Weber really flashed, but if you're going to start for Ohio State at tailback, especially with Curtis Samuel there as a very, very, very viable option to play, you're going to have to do more than flash. You're going to have to be a constant streak of lightning. And in Michael Weber's case, I think a lot of this was them realizing that they had to rely on him. If you've ever been in a sports team at any level, and there's a younger guy who comes in who turns out to be really good, then he fills a hole on your team that you were a little concerned about. You're going to be on that kid harder because you know you have to have him there. That is sports 101. The upperclassmen look at a kid who is essentially going to be a huge player for you because he's the best person available for the role. They're going to ride him harder. So I think there's a little bit of that involved. I think them sort of publicly talking about it is for them to keep the fire lit underneath them. Some people constantly need to have different forms of motivation. So maybe that's what's going on too.
Buckeyes kick off camp 1 week from Sunday. They actually move in a week from Saturday, but they actually start camp a week from Sunday, that being August 7th. So it's probably around the corner to say the least. Entering training camp, Bax, what is your biggest concern or concerns for the Buckeyes?
Biggest concern going into training camp. Well, I mean, with Brown Ted Dunn getting thrown off the team, running back depth becomes a concern because, let's face it, Antonio Williams, who looks like he has a very bright future, is still only a true freshman. Michael Weber has not ran the ball for a down for the Buckeyes. And Curtis Samuel, while he looked great 2 years ago at tailback, has not been repping at tailback and missed the spring. Dontre Wilson had missed the spring, and let's face it, Dontre Wilson hasn't been healthy for the most part for 2 years, and I'm not convinced he's big enough to carry the reps at tailback anyway. So while our top rusher, again, might be J.T. Barrett, that concerns me too, because J.T. broke his leg 2 years ago because he ran the ball so much. So depth at tailback is all of a sudden a much bigger concern than it was 2 weeks ago. I would say tailback, and I would say wide receiver, because right now it's all in flux. We don't know who's going to play. You know, is Torrance Gibson going to magically appear? What about Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor? Are they going to shake things up? Is Noah Brown really healthy? To me, the big questions are going to be the skill positions on offense. I look at the defense. I feel great about the defense across the board. The safety position has really done a 180 in my head, especially if Eric Smith really can come back healthy in camp and compete for a starting spot, something I still have to wait and see. But, man, I love the way the defense is shaping up right now. Everything seems to be going real well in terms of developing a lot of these guys. The offensive line, I'm not worried about. I think the play calling is going to be fixed after we saw the equation last year, which was Tim Beck minus the play calling responsibility equals points. So that helps. So, honestly, right now, the only concern I have is the skill positions on offense and how they're going to shake out. Urban was right. The talent is there for this team to make a run. The question is whether they're going to grow up quick enough to make it happen.
On the recruiting front, Emory Jones will announce his decision today. He's a no-frills, laid-back young man. He's just going to do it on Twitter. I really commend him for that. I love that. I love when these guys just, they don't need to, have some big press conference and have it on TV and all that. Just, wait till signing day. Apparently he's going to announce later today on Twitter, and it sounds like he will select the Buckeyes. Anything's possible, but it sounds like he will select Ohio State. Jones is ranked as the number 3 dual-threat quarterback, the number 34 overall recruit in the nation in the 2018 class. This would obviously be a huge gift for Urban Meyer and the Buckeyes, Mr. Baxendell, and would just continue their excellent recruiting of the state of Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia's been good to the Buckeyes. I'd like to take full credit for that. I come back from Georgia, and the next thing you know, Von Dowell and Raekwon McMillan and now Emory Jones are coming our way. You're welcome, everyone. And while Stephen Collier didn't get to play a lot, and probably won't, he's still a nice young man. So we're 4 for 4 in Georgia, Buckeyes following me north. But I think Emory Jones' decision was made pretty crystal clear Friday Night Lights whenever he stood next to Tate Martell and Danny Clark and was probably the most impressive of the 3. I think one of the biggest hurdles you have recruiting quarterbacks at a place like Ohio State, which is just stacking elite quarterbacks on top of each other in recruiting classes, is, hey, am I even going to get a chance to compete to be on the field? Emory Jones stood next to those 2 guys on the field at Ohio Stadium, and most observers thought he was probably the best of the 3. He certainly did not struggle. So I don't think Emory Jones is going to be afraid of the competition that's going to be here. I think just the cachet of playing in the Urban Meyer offense at Ohio State, which quickly is offensively becoming to recruits what Oregon was a few years ago. The place you want to go if you're a skilled player, the place you want to go if you're a quarterback. To me, this is a perfect fit for Emory Jones. I think he's going to be a Buckeye. And, Dave, I've said this before, probably 100 times this year, but I still can't get over it. Ohio State's recruiting right now is insane. We all know that. The year-to-year recruiting across the board is great. But the one thing we've never seen before, never at Ohio State, is quarterbacks consistently being brought in that are at this level. Ohio State always seemed to have, you know, an amazing defense and a great running game and a quarterback who was the game manager for the longest time. Since Troy Smith, that has changed, and we're really starting to see that in recruiting now. Look at the consecutive years of the great players they brought in a quarterback. I have never seen this before at Ohio State. I don't know if we're going to ever see this in the future at Ohio State, but bringing in a quarterback like this every year that Ohio State is doing is something that is unprecedented, and this is how you compete for championships every year. Ask LSU how many of our quarterbacks they die to have on their roster right now. You know, that's an example of one of those teams that's recruiting everywhere but quarterback. Ohio State is killing it at quarterback. And if Emory Jones continues to join the fold here, that's just another run of success for Ohio State's most important position. And it really underlines how amazing Urban Meyer really is in terms of recruiting. It's unprecedented.
Thanks very much to the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. You can catch his column, The Bucket, every Sunday morning on Bucknuts. And thanks to the listeners for tuning in. I hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.